Who is King David's only daughter, and why do so few know her story? Imagine a princess amidst the glory of the kingdom of Israel, surrounded by privileges but also deep silences and secrets. Tamar, the only daughter of the powerful King David, carries one of the darkest and most shocking mysteries of the Bible, a story few have dared to reveal. Prepare to dive into the behind the scenes of a family drama that shook a kingdom and marked generations. What happened to Tamar is a secret that will change the way you see the king himself and the relationships of that era. King David is remembered as one of the most complex and remarkable biblical figures. He was the hero who defeated Goliath and the visionary who united the tribes of Israel, but he was also a man surrounded by contradictions. Among his achievements and failures is his role as a father to an extensive family rife with rivalries. Within this context, Tamar, his only daughter, holds a special place, bearing both the status and consequences of being a princess in a patriarchal society. In a kingdom where political alliances were central, Tamar represented more than an isolated female presence in David's lineage. While the Bible highlights David's victories, it treats Tamar's story with a silence that amplifies the vulnerability of women at court. Her position was fragile as the king's only daughter. Among many male siblings, Tamar was a constant reminder of the risks that hovered over women's lives in a male-dominated world. David's family life was marked by internal tensions that mirrored the kingdom's external conflicts. As a warrior and leader, he was admired for his bravery. As a father, however, this image of strength contrasted with his inaction in the face of family dilemmas. Tamar was a figure whose presence revealed the frailties of David's household, where political alliances and personal interests often prevented the protection of the most vulnerable. Thus, David found himself torn between being a fearless ruler and a father role in which he often proved absent. This division between the public David and the personal David reveals that even with all his power, he failed to protect those who most needed his presence. Tamar's story sheds light on this fragility and leads us to question the limits of power and protection within a royal family. Tamar, the only daughter of King David, emerges as a character shrouded in mystery and tragedy. Her life, amid the privileges of the court, also reflected the harsh reality faced by women of the time. Although she held the title of princess, her position brought both prestige and risks, exposing her to the pressures of status and the absence of a voice. As a woman, Tamar lived confined between privilege and vulnerability. In Israelite society, women, even princesses, rarely emerged in historical records. Tamar is a rare exception, but this visibility carries significant emotional weight. Her beauty and behavior were observed and judged by the court, which expected exemplary conduct from her. Tamar represents the burden imposed on royal women, seen as symbols of honor, but often deprived of freedom. Her relationship with her brothers only reinforced her isolated position. Absalom, her full brother, showed care and protection for her, but the bond that should have safeguarded her was insufficient. In an environment where power dynamics and gender were unequal, Tamar found herself trapped in a web of expectations and restrictions. Absalom's presence offered comfort, but, as we soon see, could not save her from the tragic fate that awaited. David himself, her father, remained distant from Tamar's dilemmas. The brutal reality of the time denied her any hope of defense or full understanding of her worth. For Tamar, being a princess was not a fairy tale, but a constant struggle for survival. Her story reveals the pain of those who live in the shadow of power without the autonomy to express their own desires and fears. The dynamics between Tamar and her brothers, Absalom and Amnon, exposed the complex tensions within David's family. Absalom was more than a brother. He was the protector who nurtured a deep and zealous affection for her. This bond between them reflected an attempt at care in an environment of constant risks, offering Tamar a hope of security. However, Absalom's protection, though genuine was far from sufficient. Amnon, her half-brother, was the opposite of Absalom in every aspect. The relationship between him and Tamar was marked by distance, and unlike Absalom, Amnon viewed Tamar in a distorted way, harboring a destructive obsession for her. His obsession represents the dark side of power and desire dynamics within the court. For Tamar, his presence was a danger she did not foresee, and that would forever change her life. Amnon's plan to lure Tamar to his chamber culminates in tragedy. Moved by trust and fraternal affection, Tamar responds to Amnon's call, unaware of the lurking danger. This moment of betrayal devastated not only Tamar but also the trust and family relationships that had offered her some support. Her pain and loneliness after the event reflected the emotional abandonment and vulnerability of women at the time. After the assault, Absalom's revolt against Amnon becomes a central point in the narrative. Instead of acting impulsively, Absalom internalizes his desire for revenge and opts to wait for the right moment. The rupture between the brothers and the distancing between David and his sons highlight the fragility of family ties, revealing how fraternal love can, in some cases, be the gateway to suffering and tragedy. The assault on Tamar by Amnon is one of the most painful and disturbing passages in the Bible. Amnon, consumed by an irrational desire, devises a plan to lure Tamar under the false pretense of being ill. Tamar, unsuspecting, complies with his request and goes to her brother's chamber, driven by the desire to help him. At that moment, her trust is violated, and the impact of this event echoes in her life and those around her. For Tamar, this aggression was a violation of her body, dignity, and societal value. Amnon's act socially ostracized her and condemned her to a life of pain and isolation. At that time, a woman's honor was fundamental to her position, and Tamar, upon losing this honor, found herself cast out from the court as if her pain had rendered her invisible. This injustice represents not only a personal loss, but a rupture of trust within the family nucleus. In a desperate gesture, Tamar pleads with Amnon to at least protect her from the consequences of his actions, but he cruelly rejects and expels her. This second abandonment reinforces her helplessness. Devastated and with no options, Tamar tears her clothes and covers herself with ashes, a symbol of pain and indignation. This act is an expression of protest, making visible a pain that many prefer to ignore. The consequences extend beyond Tamar. David's passivity, as he takes no action against Amnon, contributes to Absalom's growing resentment. The violence suffered by Tamar is the starting point of a cycle of revenge that will shake the kingdom's foundations. Thus, what seemed to be a secret transforms into a flame of destruction, affecting everyone involved. Upon seeing Tamar's state, Absalom is filled with deep hatred toward Amnon. However, he controls his anger and decides to wait for the right moment to avenge his sister. Absalom represents love and revolt against the injustice suffered by Tamar, and unlike David, he does not remain silent. His patience and determination reflect the depth of his resentment and his desire to correct what his father ignored. For 2 years, Absalom keeps his vengeance secret, planning every detail meticulously. He organizes a banquet for his brothers, where finally Amnon is assassinated at Absalom's command. This violent act marks a definitive rupture between the brothers and highlights the extent of the family conflict, transforming Tamar's tragedy into a matter of honor that Absalom cannot leave unpunished. Amnon's murder profoundly shakes the kingdom, bringing to light conflicts of loyalty and the limits of fraternal love. For David, the impact of Absalom's revenge is devastating, as he now sees his family divided and his sons involved in a chain of violence. What began as an injustice becomes a cycle of pain, and the price of David's inaction begins to take its toll. By fleeing, Absalom leaves an open wound in family relations. His revenge, though fulfilling a desire for justice, plunged the family and the kingdom into a dark period marked by resentment and division. The cycle of vengeance and loss, initiated by Tamar's pain, redefines the kingdom's destiny and the relationships between father and sons, exposing the emotional cost of the pursuit of justice. David's silence after Tamar's assault is one of the most enigmatic parts of this story. As a father and king, he had the duty to intervene, but chose silence. This act of inaction, far from neutral, reinforced Tamar's pain and Absalom's revolt, who sees in his father's attitude a betrayal of family honor. For Tamar, the absence of a response is a painful abandonment that heightens her condition as a victim. David, who on so many occasions showed courage on the battlefield, seems paralyzed when faced with family conflicts. Perhaps his own past made him hesitate, or perhaps he feared the political impacts of punishing Amnon. But regardless of the reasons, his passivity had a cost: the loss of his moral authority within his own house. Tamar needed a father to protect her, but received only silence. David's decision not to act caused an irreparable division in the family, leading Absalom to take justice into his own hands. David's silence represented not just a weakness, but a failure to fulfill his role as protector. This silence echoed in the public perception of David, who began to be questioned as just an impartial leader. The king's inaction, therefore, affected not only Tamar and Absalom, but the very stability of the kingdom. David failed where he was most needed, in the heart of his own home. This omission resulted in the loss of Tamar, Absalom's rebellion, and the rupture of his family. Tamar's story, in some way, symbolizes David's failure to integrate justice and compassion, exposing the limits of power when it is incapable of protecting the most vulnerable. Despite the pain and suffering, Tamar transcends her condition as a victim to become a symbol of resistance. Her decision to tear her garments and cover herself with ashes is an act of protest that defies imposed silence. Tamar represents voices that have been silenced and demonstrates that suffering must be exposed, not hidden. Her story is a testament to the power of resisting even amidst adversity. Tamar's public stance, by refusing to hide her pain, becomes a milestone in the fight for justice. Even without power, she refused to accept injustice and silence, expressing her indignation. This act echoes as a universal appeal for society to see and hear those who suffer in silence. Tamar is a reminder that pain must be visible for there to be a possibility of healing and reparation. Her memory persists as a reminder of the need for justice for the most vulnerable. Her story shows us that neglecting others' pain perpetuates the cycle of suffering and injustice. Although her justice came indirectly, Tamar's story resonates as an inspiration for all those who at some point have been abandoned and ignored. Tamar continues to be a symbol of dignity and resistance. Her memory challenges indifference and invites us to recognize the value of each person, regardless of their position in the. And Tamar teaches us that suffering is not a burden to be carried in silence, and that justice, no matter how difficult, is a fundamental necessity for humanity. Tamar's story leaves a profound mark on the consequences of silence and injustice. Her painful journey invites us to reflect on how many Tamars still exist today, people living among us, facing hidden sufferings and without a voice. As a society, we are challenged to consider the role of justice within families and the devastating impact of omission. Tamar reminds us that the home, which should be a refuge, can become a place of betrayal when justice is neglected. David's silence exposed a human failure that remains relevant: the risk of omission in the face of others' suffering. The story leads us to question whether we are willing to break this silence and support those in vulnerable situations. How, then, can we ensure that no Tamar is left in silence? Her story is an invitation for us to be more attentive and compassionate to those around us, so that no one else has to carry the burden of silence. By remembering Tamar, we are called to build homes and societies where support and justice are accessible to all. And what about you? How does this story impact you? Leave your comment below and share your thoughts. Let's build together a community where every person is valued and heard. Tamar's story is a testament to the value of justice and the price of silence. She reminds us that even in the most powerful families, love and justice are fundamental. Her memory teaches us to break the silence and promote support and compassion for those who need it most. May we learn from her story and be a voice for those who suffer. If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video, leave your comment, and subscribe to the channel. These actions help the channel grow and ensure you don't miss any new content. Let's together create a supportive community where everyone feels heard and valued.